Our guest today began her career in 1974 as an educator of, quote, trainable mentally handicapped children, unquote, at the Barnard Elementary School on the South Side. That fact alone tells you something about our guest's commitment and character to education. She also has been an advocate for teacher empowerment and education reform. Our guest today holds a bachelor's degree in elementary and secondary education from Western Illinois, a master's in special education from Chicago State, and a PhD in educational policy analysis from the University of Illinois at Chicago. Those are impressive credentials. In 1992, she interrupted her teaching career to work in foundation programs, including one with the MacArthur Foundation, until 1995, when she returned to the classroom, teaching the 8th grade at Marquette Grade School until her election as president of the Chicago Teachers Union in the year 2001. Ladies and gentlemen, it gives me great pleasure to introduce the president of the Chicago Teachers Union, Deborah Lynch. Deborah?
Well, good afternoon, everybody, and thank you for that warm applause. I feel better already. Got the butterflies going. I don't know about you, but when that tray of lasagna went around the table, got a little shaky there. I stand here this afternoon representing 35,000 members of the Chicago Teachers Union, men and women on the front lines of our struggle to improve the quality of urban public education for the nearly 450,000 children attending Chicago public schools. We represent professionals and paraprofessionals who work in both the highest scoring schools in the state of Illinois and the lowest. One of the union's most important roles is speaking out on behalf of the issues and concerns of our members, to give voice to those concerns, the hopes, the dreams, and the recommendations of those frontline professionals. Our series that we're launching today is a series of studies and symposia called Views from the Front, a 6-part combination research study and symposium series sponsored by CTU and presented by the University of Illinois Institute for Labor and Industrial Relations. This series is going to be focusing on issues of local significance tied to the national debate about education and related to the No Child Left Behind legislation. Our series provides the opportunity to frame issues and highlight stories from the perspective of our members, the teachers and paraprofessionals in the nation's 3rd largest public school system. And today's issue is teacher flight from the Chicago Public Schools. In addition to today, our series is going to span the next year, and co-sponsoring organizations with CTU on topics as varied as teacher evaluation and violence in our schools include the Chicago Community Trust, the Joyce Foundation, the Woods Fund, the Civic Committee of the Commercial Club, and the publisher of Catalyst, Voices for Chicago School Reform, who will serve as the moderators for our series, one of the series. Now, how did the Chicago Teachers Union arrive at this point of promoting leadership and partnerships with such esteemed organizations on these critical issues facing our schools and really facing our society? It began about 2 years ago. 2 years ago tomorrow, actually, is the anniversary of the new leadership of the Chicago Teachers Union taking office. But it began 2 years ago when members of the Chicago Teachers Union took back their union by voting in union leaders who promised to vigorously advocate for them and for their concerns, who promised greater union democracy, who promised to reach out to important stakeholders in the community, and to advocate for a quality education for every child attending the Chicago Public Schools. I must say thank you to my fellow officers who are here with me today. Howard Heath, if you'd stand and be recognized, Vice President of the Chicago Teachers Union. James Alexander, Financial Secretary. And Maureen Callahan, Treasurer. And Jackie Ward, our Recording Secretary, is on assignment. With these leaders, we have come into office with the belief that CTU, Chicago Teachers Union, can make a difference in the lives of our members and the children and families they serve. That we can work to elevate the teaching profession and enhance student achievement, at the same time honoring our obligation and responsibility to protect our members' rights. We firmly believe that it is as much the duty of the union to preserve public education as it is to negotiate a good contract. We began this agenda by aggressively reaching out to our members and actively engaging them in meaningful dialogue. We began by enhancing our communications. The 5 officers of the Chicago Teachers Union in the last 2 years have participated in union meetings in over 400 of our 600 schools, and we intend to finish up the last 200 within the next school year. We have done surveys, we have done internal focus groups, we're in the middle of creating an interactive website, and we have developed an email army of over 10,000 email addresses of our members who get a weekly outreach from their union on key issues and key messages from the union. We've created a lean, mean mobilizing machine at CTU, a network of union leaders in every area of the city and in every school who are ready to mobilize our members when needed. In just 2 days this month, that network collected over $24,000 for the CTU for Kids Student Special Assistance Fund, which gives money and gives out eyeglasses, hearing aids, and clothing for needy Chicago Public School students. The leadership I just introduced you to have spent the last 2 years repositioning the union for this new dual emphasis on contract enforcement and quality schools. We have, for example, dramatically increased the budget for the CTU Quest Center, which is the union's professional development and educational policy arm. This Quest Center has, as an example of the kind of leadership we're pushing, the highest pass rate of any support program in the country for helping teachers get board certified, achieve board certification similar to doctors do. Our union-developed, union-run, teacher-to-teacher program has the highest pass rate of any program in the state of the United States of America. We've increased that budget by 150% and doubled the staff. We firmly believe, that if public education is in danger, then we must all work together to improve it. And that means reaching out and developing meaningful relationships and meaningful partnerships. We've established, for example, quarterly meetings with business groups, with parent groups, with reform and community groups on issues of mutual interest and common concern. We've engaged, we believe, in constructive dialogue and problem solving with Arnie Duncan and the leadership of the Chicago Public Schools and the Chicago Board of Education under the leadership of Michael Scott. That effort has resulted in 2 major agreements, one on the restoration of our bargaining rights and the other on a new project to support 10 schools. Thanks to the leadership of the mayor, who was willing to reconsider the former prohibition on our bargaining rights, and to Mr. Duncan, Mr. Scott, to Senate President Emil Jones, to House Speaker Michael Madigan, to many of the legislators in this room today, including Monique Davis, and with the support of the Chicago business community under the leadership of Eden Martin. We got a bill passed this spring, signed into law by Governor Blagojevich, the first bill of his administration, which gives Chicago teachers and other union members in the city important input on such important education reform issues as class size and student assessment. We applaud CEO Arnie Duncan, who was willing to reconsider his policy of closing schools for low student achievement this year, which enabled us to establish an unprecedented partnership between the CTU and the CPS to support 10 schools, to support the turnaround of 10 high-poverty schools. We're looking for a hat trick this summer if we can reach a mutually acceptable new contract allowing for schools to open on time. This is a process which both sides have agreed not to negotiate in the press, but both sides have mutually agreed. It is in our common interest and it is a common goal that we have a successful agreement in time for schools to open on time. We've worked to empower our members in other ways too. A CTU bill, co-sponsored by the groups Design for Change and Parents United for Responsible Education, will replace the legislatively mandated professional personnel advisory committees in the schools with something called the PPLC, Professional Personnel Leadership Committee. This bill, replacing advisory with leadership, requires administrators and local school council members to act on recommendations from their faculty, not just listen to them and oftentimes ignore them. Our bills to reduce class size in the lower grades in the poorest schools and to add 4 months to kindergarten in poor schools, adding 2 months before, 2 months after the traditional year, have both passed and are pending funding. Future legislative priorities must include fair funding of our schools because, as we all know, our over-reliance on property taxes makes Illinois the second worst state in the nation in the disparity between money given to affluent schools and money given to schools serving poor students. We're already 48th in the nation in the amount of state funding to education. That's the background of my talk. Here are the issues. Many people do not realize that fully 85% of the children attending Chicago public schools live in poverty. And poverty, while not an excuse for low student achievement, is a guarantee, is a predictor of low student achievement unless the right strategies and resources and supports are put into place to counter the crushing effects of poverty on student learning. Many people do not realize that children from low socioeconomic backgrounds arrive at school years behind their more advantaged counterparts. Research tells us, for example, that low-income children arrive in kindergarten knowing about 6,000 fewer words than their middle-class peers do when they start school. 6,000 fewer words. Research also shows us that that gap only grows over time. Not because these children are not capable of learning, but because they haven't had as many opportunities as more advantaged students. In my last year of teaching prior to becoming union president, I taught 8th grade. It was the same year my daughter was in 8th grade, and every single day that year, I looked into the eyes of the achievement gap, both at home and at school. I am haunted and driven by the differences between what my middle-class 8th grade daughter knew and was able to do compared to the 8th graders in my class, 99% of whom live below the poverty level. I am driven to close that achievement gap. One of my students, Roosevelt, is a case in point. 15 years old in the 8th grade, he came in with 4th grade reading skills and was chronically tardy and absent. In reviewing his school history, I learned that he had failed both the 6th grades and the 8th grades before me, and between grades 1 through 8 had missed 180 days of school, an entire school year. Children like Roosevelt, who start school years behind, even when they do achieve a full year's growth for a year's time, never catch up without the additional resources and the expert teachers needed to accelerate their learning. Teaching, and in particular, teaching poor children, is rocket science. Yet the fact is, many current policies and practices drive many infinitely skilled teachers, the ones we need the most, away from the children and the schools who need them the most. National studies prove that school districts serving poor children have up to 4 times the number of uncertified teachers. Poor children, too often, have the most undercertified, uncertified, and least experienced teachers. Poor children have only a 50% chance of being taught by a qualified math or science teacher. National studies on teacher quality have identified teacher attrition as a major problem hitting urban districts particularly hard and imposing heavy costs on us. 30 to 50% nationally of new teachers leave the profession within 3 to 5 years. Now, this is not to say that recruitment is not a problem. It is. Last year, for example, over 1,700 uncertified teachers taught in Chicago public school classrooms. Lowering our standards in the face of teacher shortages cannot be the answer. Removing barriers, some of them artificial barriers to recruitment, is a way to go. At CTU's urging, some might say hounding, Chicago Public Schools did modify its current residency policy. But even that turned out to be so restrictive that it wasn't as effective as it's needed. And we believe that it is time to put a complete moratorium on the city's residency policy for teachers until we can guarantee every child in Chicago is being taught by a qualified certified teacher. The leadership of the Chicago Teachers Union commissioned the study that we are releasing today in an effort to obtain statistically reliable data as to why teachers leave Chicago public schools. It's our effort to move beyond anecdotal evidence, to raise public awareness on the issue, and to use our findings to develop a comprehensive strategy for addressing what is a crisis in our profession. The issue of teacher attrition is not a new one. Traditionally, we have relied on a steady flow of women and minorities who too often had limited career paths and who now have more respected, in many cases more lucrative career options open to them today. The issue of teacher attrition is a personal one for me as well. In my first round of teaching in Chicago in the mid to late 70s, I too left the classroom after 5.5 years, for many of the same reasons as teachers in our current study: lack of professional respect, lack of administrative support, lack of voice, in short, a sense of professional powerlessness. In fact, my dissertation study 20 years ago was on the root causes of teachers' sense of professional power and powerlessness and what could be done to raise teachers' sense of effectiveness. I did that study, by the way, with the assistance of my union. Then CTU President Robert Healy endorsed my study and allowed me to use the CTU database to get a random sample of teachers for my survey. And it's no coincidence that I turned to my union, for the union is the only source of power that teachers have. The question before us all is whether or not we can use that power to advance the profession and student achievement in our schools, as well as ensure that teachers' rights are protected. At the time of my study, I concluded that the cost of elevating the teaching profession in Chicago by addressing things like increasing teacher respect, increasing teacher support, and providing teachers a greater say in decision-making would not be an insurmountable cost. But I stand here 20 years later and look back and realize that it's a cost that society has still decided is too great a cost to pay. Our current study, commissioned by the Chicago Teachers Union and conducted by Professor Robert Bruno and the University of Illinois Institute for Labor and Industrial Relations, is before you today. You have a packet with our executive summary and our complete PowerPoint results. And Professor Bruno, if you'd stand up and be recognized. Professor Bruno. Professor Bruno will be available also to answer questions after my talk. The study has concluded that CPS, Chicago Public Schools, has lost a large group of experienced, mature, very well-educated, and career-oriented teaching professionals across disciplines and across grades due to a diverse range of school organization conditions. Bruno found that foremost among those conditions was behavior problems of the students, followed by a perceived lack of support, appreciation, and respect shown toward teachers by administration. The 62-question survey, the executive summary which you have before you, was sent to all of our members who left the Chicago Public Schools between the years 1991 and 2002. We had a statistically significant response rate, and you may review the study in details. The categories included questions on school safety and student behavior, on faculty material benefits, on administrative support, student characteristics, and the physical environment of the school. I'm going to highlight a couple of the findings and then share with you 5 findings that struck me particularly strongly. Under school safety and student behavior, 68% of the respondents reported that there were numerous behavioral problems affecting learning. 45% believed that organized gang-related violence occurred often. 46% thought quote, threats of violence from students and parents occurred frequently, and 55% reported incidents of theft and personal property damage occurred frequently. 54% thought pay was inadequate for the demands of the job. And under administrative support, 62% thought teachers had no real power to make changes. 2/3 of the respondents reported feeling no real power to make changes. 52% thought principals did not provide genuine support to teachers. 65% stated that the administration did not have a program to remove disruptive children from the classroom. And 57% reported that they did not always have access to quality learning materials. Regarding student characteristics, 76% agreed that many parents were not involved in their children's education. 60% agreed that many of the children in their classes needed special services, but they were not provided. And 61% agreed that socio and economic problems of students disrupted the teaching learning process. The final page of the executive summary shows the 6 most identified reasons that people reported leaving in the order that they reported them. Behavioral problems of the students, principals' lack of support and appreciation, insufficient parental involvement was 3rd, large class sizes was 4th, inadequate learning materials was 5th, and inadequate pay for the demands of the job was 6th. While there is much to be taken from the study and much that confirms what those of us familiar with the lives of teachers already know, here are the 5 findings that struck me the most. 42% of the respondents had taught somewhere else before they came to the Chicago Public Schools, showing us that a significant number of those who left came in with work experience. They were not neophytes, but experienced, well-educated professionals who wanted to make a difference. Secondly, 45% continue to teach now. That nearly half still continue to teach indicate that these very well-educated, experienced professionals had a dedication and a commitment to making teaching a lifelong profession. But it is our loss and the loss to our district, our schools, and our children that the experience, expertise, and continuity is gone. The third of 5 that struck me included 49% taught in at least one probation school. The CTU has long said that past punitive sanctions placed on high poverty, low scoring schools, such as intervention and reconstitution and school closure, ran experienced teachers out of the schools and away from the children who need them most. This study confirms that. And we are hopeful that with efforts such as our new agreement, our partnership agreement to support 10 struggling schools, that there will be a new public understanding of the issues teachers face in high poverty, low scoring schools, and that together we can work to reverse this exodus of teachers from our schools. We don't close police stations in high crime areas. We add resources, we target resources, and we need to do the same for our schools. Fourth, 62% of the teachers agreed that teachers had no real power to make changes. If teaching is ever to become a true profession, as it is in many places around the world, then we must invest in those we place incredible trust, the lives of our children, with a say in decision-making and in the improvement of their schools. Teachers want to be agents of change, not targets of change. And our new CTU-sponsored legislation, which Representative Monique Davis told me today was going to get signed by the governor, changing advisory to leadership committees in our schools is a step forward in giving teachers greater voice. And the fifth finding that shocked me, surprised me, or alarmed me, was that 60% of the teachers reported that the students in their classes needed special services that they were not getting. Witnessing generation after generation of welfare families not advancing. Seeing poor children in kindergarten and first grade in class sizes of 33 to 35. Seeing children coming in so far behind and not getting the preventative help they need all contribute to painful, sometimes overwhelming feelings of powerlessness when you are working so hard to make a difference. Well, there are 5 things the CTU intends to do as a result of our study. Number one, we intend to develop and disseminate training programs on effective school-wide discipline programs for our members in school leadership positions. Number two, we are going to be calling on the next president of the Chicago Principals and Administrators Association. Since the unfortunate and early death of Bev Tunney, they're going to be electing a new leader next month. We're going to call on the new president of the Chicago Principals and Administrators Association to join a task force to explore ways that principals and CTU school leaders can provide greater support to teachers on issues such as discipline, access to quality materials, and implementing mentoring strategies for new teachers. Thirdly, we're going to expand the outreach of the Chicago Teachers Union Quest Center, our professional development arm, by offering workshops, courses, and technical support directly to the schools rather than in the 3 sites that we currently do it now. And those efforts at outreach will focus on strategies to reduce and prevent discipline problems and to enhance parent involvement in their children's education. Fourth, we will be addressing such vital concerns that were raised in this survey as class size, as inadequate salaries, and access to instructional materials where they are best addressed at the bargaining table this summer. And fifth, we will be presenting our findings to the Chicago Public Schools and the Board of Education and calling for the identification of schools with exorbitantly high rates of attrition and turnover and seek an immediate investigation of those revolving door schools. We believe that the future of public education is at stake. In addition to the crushing effects of poverty that I've outlined, there are many challenges before us. The No Child Left Behind legislation, while having many noble goals, has many difficulties, especially for urban school districts. Gone amok, run amok, No Child Left Behind run amok could conceivably result in most of our schools being identified as schools that are in need of improvement and provide the ammunition to those who would like to see the complete dismantling of public education. And while imperfect, public education has been an important commitment of our country and a bedrock of our society. Chicago must invest in the strategies to attract and keep the best and the brightest in our Chicago classrooms. We must, however, also remember those teachers who have stayed, despite the odds, teachers who are too often scapegoated for society's lack of support for their schools. Chicago currently has the most educated, and we would say the most dedicated teaching force this city has ever seen. Chicago school children, 85% of whom are poor and who need the best and the brightest the most, are counting on all of us to get this right. I'd like to close with the words engraved on the memorial of Franklin Delano Roosevelt in Washington, D.C. It's a direct quote from FDR, and he said, quote, "The test of our progress is not whether we add to the abundance of those who have much, it is whether we provide enough to those who have little." Thank you very much.
I'm not used to people standing and applauding when I'm at the podium, so I took a step back. If you have a question for Ms. Lynch, step up to the microphone right there. City Club members, you know the routine, and just say who you are and where you're from, and we'll just get as many questions as possible. Doc?
Hi, Herb Sohn, a physician attorney and product of the public schools, including a state university. One question I wanted to ask, and this is just a question, have you done good surveys on why you mentioned why teachers stay, on why your best teachers stay? We're doing that now. You know, you don't learn too much about why people leave. It seems to me it's more important to talk to your best teachers and find out where they're staying in the system, especially when you're having difficulties, perhaps in certain schools. I was wondering if you did that.
Well, we believe it's important to know the pulse of both members, and so our first focus was on why people left as a reason, given the brain drain from our schools of many, many experienced teachers. But you're absolutely right. We are constantly doing surveys, focus groups. We're going to be doing a Peter Hart survey this summer. We are constantly making sure that we are in touch with the needs, the concerns, and what it is that's good about teaching that keeps people in, because you're absolutely right. We've got to keep those folks there and not contribute to learn. Yeah, absolutely.
Thank you.
My name is Selma Stewart White. I'm a retired public school teacher. I'm a member of RTAC, Retired Teachers Association of Chicago. I've also been a part of the tutoring program that the Board of Education started. I've been retired 10 years now. I have 2 or 3 concerns I want to address. What do you plan to do to decrease this gap between your middle class 8th grader and this young man that you taught? That's one concern. The other concern does the union plan to do anything in regard to the discrepancies in school equipment? And I have reference to Northside College Prep and Southside College Prep, which is now Gwendolyn Brooks. There's a vast difference there. I do believe people can learn under any circumstance, but I really do think there should be something done there. The other thing is, when I was doing some tutoring, I was at a Southside school, and the first thing I noticed was there are too many children in the classroom. You mentioned class size. My point is, Skinner School might work with 26 in the classroom, but another school might need just 15. And what are you going to do about an issue like that? A teacher that at some schools where the kids, even though they can have breakfast at school, they might not get there early enough to get it, and then there are other kinds of problems. So a number of these issues, when we talk about no child being left behind, there are some issues that come before the kid gets to school.
Yes. Okay, well, to boil down your question, what are we going to do to close the achievement gap? What research tells us, 2 important ways. Number 1, teacher quality, ensuring that every child, including the children in the classrooms of those 1,700 classrooms that had uncertified teachers, that every child has the right to be taught by a qualified certified teacher. And research also tells us that the school size and class size are critical elements. So we're going to be doing a number of things, including getting as far as we possibly can at the bargaining table on those issues.
But checking with the Board of Education has systematically, I taught in other school districts, but my impression that the Board of Education has systematically shown issues of racism in terms of equipment, etc. And I admire what you're doing, and I applaud you, and I'm happy that you are the new president. But I mean, are we going to address these racial issues?
Well, what you're talking about is the magnet schools and the selective schools that were developed as a way to try and keep middle class and non-minority families in the city. Correct. So we've got policies that in many cases have a negative fallout. Those were policies that were intended to try and solve one problem, and they've created other problems. We've got neighborhood high schools, for example, that have 25 to 35% of special ed kids in them because the high-achieving kids in the neighborhood have gone to selective schools. So we need to take a look at what policies are put into place to solve certain problems and the unintended consequences. Those are issues that we raise at every possible opportunity, including some of the negative fallout on our high schools that have 25, 35% special ed kids compared to single-digit kids in selective enrollment high schools. So there's lots of important issues out there. There's lots of work to be done, and we're ready to do it. Thank you.
Hi, Dr. Lynch, President Lynch. My name's Arlene Crandall, and I'm a 38-and-a-half-year veteran of the school system. and I'm also a product
Congratulations.
of the Chicago Public Schools. I've had a great career. It's about to end, unless you can do something else to help me stay. But I've had the experience of working with, most recently, 4 small schools in a larger school within a school, high school situation. It's been fabulous. My suggestion of retention would be that we do a more intensive job with our in-service programs for students who are intending to become teachers, and that, like some of our suburban counterparts, you seriously consider using veteran teachers like myself in a part-time flex arrangement to help us mentor. I've had a great experience. The teacher who is the Chicago Public Schools Service Learning Teacher of the Year is someone I mentored, and she's somebody from the GO program, and I'm very, very proud of the work she's done and that we've done as a school. So keep up the good work. But think about some of those other unusual out-of-the-box ideas.
Great, thank you.
Good afternoon, Ms. Lynch. My name is Derek Harris, and I'm a member of the local school council at Herzl Elementary School in North Lawndale. I'm also the executive director of the North Lawndale LSC Federation. As I was listening to your comments, and 2 of the schools that are part of your 10 schools are in North Lawndale, Chalmers and Collins. The Federation attended a corrective action meeting in which the AIO was there, Janetta James. And the #1 problem at Collins was teacher attendance. Because of those various social ills and maladies that are in the school. But the one thing as I was listening to your talk that I found particularly disturbing was there was no mention of parental involvement. And I believe, particularly in those communities, parental involvement is key. The Chicago Tribune did a story a couple of weeks ago about No Child Funds Left Behind. In North Lawndale, $73,000 almost went back downtown. Fortunately, we were able to save half of that. But $35,000 of No Child Left Behind parent involvement funds went back downtown to the general funds. I don't understand that. And so how can one of the poorest communities in Chicago send money back downtown? Moreover, there is no way that any teacher, I don't care how well prepared they are, how committed they are, can do an effective job in the classroom without parent cooperation and participation. And that is the flaw in your formula, that is a flaw in that position, because unless you get people to buy into that, you're going to fail in spite of your good intentions and your efforts. And I say that respectively, and I hope that at some point we'll have the opportunity to sit down as a representative from the Federation to discuss our position on that, because I really, really want to hear firsthand what you had to say, and that's why I made every effort to get here. But I think that that is a critical flaw, not having those parents involved who need the most help, because as you mentioned, you were appalled at the disparity between your daughter and the students that you taught. Your daughters have Deborah Lynch for a mother. Thank you.
Thank you, and I look forward to continuing the dialogue. You're absolutely right, and these teachers also reported, 75% of them reported wanting to see more parental involvement in their children's education, so we definitely want to make a concerted effort to support that.
Deborah, thank you for a wonderful speech, very informative.
Not everybody knows who you are.
I'm State Representative Monique Davis. I'm the Vice Chair of Elementary Secondary Education in the state of Illinois. I taught schools, Chicago Public Schools, for 19 years. I am an administrator and have been for a number of years with Chicago Public Schools. I have 3 major concerns. The first is the University of Chicago, a private institution with only 4.4% African American graduates from their university driving our system today. I'm very concerned about the University of Chicago running CPS today. They have in no way shown any expertise in teaching of
Now,
reading.
you're not confusing
I don't
them
want you
with
to,
our study,
no,
which was UIC.
I understand that. I know UIC.
Okay,
I know UIC. But I'm speaking of the
in general.
University of Chicago. I don't believe they should be guiding the system of teaching of African American children when they show themselves they have no interest in African American people. Now that's number one. Number two,
I think you're talking to the wrong person.
well, I'm talking to all of you. They're here. They're here. I've sent a letter to the mayor and I sent a letter to Arnie Duncan. The University of Chicago has not proven that they're friends of or interested in educating African American people, and they should not be guiding that system. For the first time in 13 years, our scores plummeted. The reading program has failed. Deborah, you must discuss that because your group will take the blame. But it's being guided by people who don't have the expertise or the concern. That's it for that. Restructured days. There are too many of them. Children are out of school too many days for teachers to become educated. If they must have training, it must be on their time and not the time of our children, when the children should be learning. It's too many days. And the very third thing is, and this too I'm talking to both groups, the failure rate is too high. You cannot continue to kill the self-esteem of a child by putting an 11-year-old in a class with an 8-year-old. Third graders who repeat third grade 2 and 3 times. It is not productive. So I know this kind of discussion can take a great length, but I'm a black person. I'm a black mother, a black grandmother, and I know how important it is that you do not destroy the self-esteem of children. Suspensions, and then I'm going to sit down. House Bill 205. Children that are suspended from school, in my opinion, with this day and age, should be given an opportunity to go to a community-based organization and receive some structured learning. They cannot be out in the street. Now, I'm not saying don't suspend, but I'm saying we cannot suspend them to zero. They must be suspended, Mr. Mayor. They must be suspended to productive, supervised programs. That's House Bill 205. Help me get it out of the Senate. Thank you.
Okay, Monique. Thank you, Representative.
No, I sure. My name is Vera Paul, a director for the Board of RTAC, and I would like to make an observation that has happened since I've been in the system. We do not, Booker T. Washington said, give the child a trade, and then from that trade, he'll get his education. One of the basic things this system, and look like all over the country, they are thinking that every child that goes to school has to go to a college. So what you've done to this system since I've been in it since 1962, and I retired early, 59 and a half. And speaking to that physician that got up there, we didn't retire because we didn't have insurance. You know, the doctors are running because they didn't have insurance. We ran because we didn't have protection. Our union wasn't doing a good job at that time till Deborah came in.
Oh, thank you.
One of the things we need to go back is to give our schools trade. Redmond brought that in. Every school had a trade. And the kids, when they did leave, they had something to do. We learned in the 7th and 8th grade, we taught, you know, arts and craft. We taught home economics. Now the kid can't even make a dress. The next thing you've done to our system, you have taken out all of the physical education. You have taken our music. You have taken all of the things that makes a cultured society. And then most of all, you sit up and tell me, now I came through the 60s where we had to take the test. The man sitting there, 5 men sitting up there with us little ladies, and you better not say ain't because you're black. You know what I mean? Take that oral. And that, you know, you better not. You can make 97 on the test. They throw you out if you say ain't. What I'm saying is this. You cannot lead me and be superintendent and you don't have the masters with 46 hours and you're going to tell me I need to be qualified. We got too many people in this system running this system that don't have the education the teachers have, and you're always talking about we are not qualified. You want to know one thing? My mom taught 42 years, and they taught 8th grade, 12th grade seniors when they came out. You don't need a master's degree for 46 hours to teach in 8th grade. You need materials and people who understand that everybody's a human and it's not a factory, it's an academia. And you need to remove, I want to say this to help you, You need to take society ills out of the school and let us get back to the business of teaching. Thank you.
Right. I have a question. I have a couple. I was just going to say, I'm not going to make a statement. Well, I'm going to not try to. My name is Teresa Garate Serafini, and I'm on faculty at the Department of Disability and Human Development at UIC. And I used to be a bilingual special education teacher in Chicago, and I left it 5 years. Shh, don't shoot me. But my question is, because there are so many kids in our system, over 50,000 with special needs, identified IEPs, and a number more, maybe 4,000 or 5,000 with Section 504 plans, and a lot of literature on teacher shortage and paperwork and how that impacts special education. And I am wondering if in your study that was something that was found to be true or supported, and I think that question is for Dr. Bruno, so yay. But I also wanted to ask a different question. In education, there have been some creative ways of grow your own teacher, right, for the African American community and for different groups. And being a bilingual special education teacher, I also know that there's a growing immigrant population in the city. And many times, one of the things myself as a teacher that becomes a barrier is attitudes or expectations. And I wonder if any of that came out in your study of teacher attitudes and expectations and how that impacts their effectiveness. And something that's very creative, I had the opportunity to present to NIDR, the National Institute on Disability Rehabilitation Research, just last week, talking to them about their long-range planning on how do we get more people with disabilities to be teachers. And looking at that as a creative way, because once people with disabilities see teachers that are like them, they might also be impacted in their expectation. I wonder if the Chicago Teachers Union has given any thought to that. So those are two questions.
Okay, Professor Bruno, since you're standing right near the mic, can you can you take it away?
I'm sitting in the right place, apparently. If you look at the administrative support summary, the section of the summary, there are two questions that we reported that did address questions of prep time and having to prepare to respond to standardized testing and its impact on creative teaching. And you find that an overwhelming percentage of people agreed that the more paperwork that they had forced upon them that they found meaningless did in fact impact the quality of their teaching skills and their education. Something else that's not in the summary, because it's a summary, it's not the entire report, every single question reported, but we did some other bits of analysis, and one of the things we did was to isolate out different groups and to see how they responded. In short, teachers who were identified as being special ed instructors reported much higher levels of dissatisfaction on all of the organizational condition variables. Class size was through the roof. They were having serious problems with materials, with the behavior of children, with the support of the principal on their behalf. So if you only studied special ed teachers, this report would be dramatically worse than it appears to be. If that helps.
Thanks, Professor. And special ed is one of the key shortage areas. For the third year in a row, there have been over 400 special ed vacancies in the Chicago Public Schools, and people are being driven out of special ed back into regular ed because of the demands that you're talking about. And it is one of our demands at the bargaining table as well. We will be discussing that this summer.
Good afternoon, Ms. Lynch. I'm Cheryl Lamb-Gunn with Quaker Oats and PepsiCo. And I want to find out, you mentioned all the aspects of teacher training. Beyond to help students achieve, obviously, the core subjects of reading, writing, math, and the Head Start programs, the elementary school, what more are we doing for teacher training to align with business to ensure that our school children are prepared for the jobs in our city and in our country, so that our teachers are prepared to teach the subjects, the protocols, whatever the needs are for students to get jobs, whether immediately out of high school or, more importantly, after college and beyond?
Well, I think one of the previous speakers referenced the decline of vocational education in our city schools, for example. I think if a survey was done with students, as to high school students, as to why they leave, that's one of the reasons. Over the last decade or so, vocational education has been decimated across our city. We do have a new leader over at the Chicago Public Schools who's been brought in to revitalize the vocational education piece. She's done a very active outreach to union members, to our vocational ed committee. And so they'd be in a better position to, the Board of Ed leadership would be in a better position to articulate all the ways that they're working with the business community. But that certainly is an important one because the kids do report leaving because they don't see the academic piece as much of an enhancement. And prior years, that vocational education piece was the hook to teach them the academics. So it's an important question, and I think maybe talking to the new head of the CPS vocational education and business section would be important. Jill Winebanks is her name, right?
Yes.
My name is James F. Ford. I've been on the pension fund and in the pension fund office for about 40 years for Chicago teachers, pensioners.
You retired and your new job is 40 years of service. Whoa.
I worked there for 35 and I've been on the board for 5 or 6. And in the paper yesterday in the Tribune, there was an article telling how the downstate school system compares to us as far as the manipulation of the pension formula. And it's a problem that I think I've been personally aware of for many years. And I wonder, it's very encouraging, all of the things that you're saying today, and I'm very encouraged for the children of Chicago. But to what extent do you think this disparity between pension formulas between downstate and Chicago may have on our efforts to retain teachers, and will we have exoduses if we let that happen here? And well, anyway, what would be the effect of this seeming disparity between the other teachers and us on our attempts to retain teachers?
Well, it may be one of the many things that draws people away from the Chicago Public Schools to the suburban areas if the pensions, packages look better. However, the downstate pension funds are not nearly as well funded as the Chicago Teacher Pension Fund, thanks to your leadership and Mary Sharon Riley behind you, who is the former president of the Chicago Teachers Pension Fund. And just for the record, those pension enhancements that were described in the newspaper are not currently part of the pension system for the Chicago Public School teachers. Our focus, our legislative focus regarding pensions has been more trying to create equity in pensions when it comes to after overtime and summer school, having our work be made pensionable. That's been the top priority of the Chicago Teachers Union. That, like teachers in the rest of the state, our top priority is seeing that overtime, that summer school become considered for pension purposes.
Right, okay. I'll make this quick. As Debbie said, I'm Mary Sharon Riley, the former president of the Chicago Teachers Pension Fund, a retired teacher. But my question relates to something quite different. I was listening to the radio the other night, and a gentleman was being interviewed who wrote a book called The Worm in the Apple. I'm sure Debbie probably has heard about it. And it talks about, no, okay, you're going to, I'm sure, because he talks about the negative impact of unions on education in this country. And he talked a lot about it, and he thought that unions were halting the progress of education. And it's something all of us are going to have to answer, because as strong union members and as dedicated teachers, we certainly feel that we are not a hindrance but more a help, because we are the ones that are interested in providing quality education for the children of Chicago. And I was so disturbed listening to this. I thought, how can this gentleman do this? I mean, I don't want to call him a gentleman even, but at any rate. And he's focused, interestingly enough, his negativism focused more on the NEA, never mentioned the A of T. For that I was a little bit grateful, but other than that, I think it's something that we have to answer, and I'm sure a lot of members of the business community might feel the same way this man did feel. And I think it's something that we have to look at and answer.
Well, the facts are on our side. If you take a look nationally at all the states that have collective bargaining for teachers and compare test scores, there is no comparison. In states where there are no collective bargaining rights for teachers, states like good old Texas and other places in the South, where teachers have not even gotten what we've gotten in terms of salary and working conditions, you will see a direct correlation. States with bargaining rights have overall higher student achievement as measured on state tests. But the other issue, or the other part of your question, is the challenge for us today. Can we do both? Can we, teachers union, union of professionals, can we do both? Can we ensure that the salaries, the working conditions, and the rights are protected, and at the same time improve our profession and the organizations in which we work? We believe you can. We have that agenda. In fact, I should say that our proposal to partner up on these 10 low-performing schools was discussed and debated in our House of Delegates in a very heated debate. Was this union business? Was fixing schools union work? And I'm proud to say, after much discussion and debate, by a vote of 3-1, our House of Delegates voted, yes, leadership, go forward. We're authorizing you to go forward in this partnership, which in effect put the Chicago Teachers Union on the record as having a stake in the turnaround of our schools. So the more efforts that we can do like that, the more we'd be able to counter that anti-union negativity.
Interestingly enough, this interview was on Milt Rosenberg's show, University of Chicago.
My name is Veronica Chemers. I'm a product of Chicago Public Schools, and also I have over 30 years of experience. And also, I'm a product of immigrant parents. Immigrant parents didn't come to the schools at all. If they were called to the schools, I would have something to reckon with at home. So the attitude was completely different. When the mother and the father are concerned about the education at home, then the child will produce at school. When is music coming back into the schools? When is physical education going to come back in the schools? When is foreign language going to come into the schools? And those are my questions, and I give my support to my Retired Teachers Association, of which I am a member. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much.
Deborah, you earned this. Here's a City Club mug. Here's a one-year membership. How about a big round of applause for Deborah? We conclude this meeting because I'm going to go to a corner saloon. It's difficult when you're a product of Chicago Public Schools and a graduate of the University of Chicago. I don't know what to say. Meeting adjourned.